Now, I'm not a lawyer, but let's talk about the defense's closing argument and why they insist Diddy is not guilty of RICO, trafficking, or any of the other charges tied to this case. If you caught my part 1 video, then you already know. We broke down the government's side, how they claim they've shown Diddy's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, but now it's time to hear what Team Diddy had to say. Just a quick reminder, closing arguments are when both sides gather all the testimony and evidence presented and try to sway the jury one final time. Now, what the lawyers say during closings isn't considered actual evidence, but it does lay out the narrative they want the jurors to follow. And just like the prosecution had their theme, Diddy doesn't take no for an answer. The defense had their own strategy, too. Their theme, the tale of 2 trials. Diddy's lead attorney Agnifilo took center stage to explain it. He says one version of the trial relies on facts, direct witness statements, verified text messages, and actual footage. But the other version, that's the story prosecutors are trying to spin, a version built more on assumptions than reality. For example, Agnifilo points out that while the evidence shows Diddy had drugs for personal use and lived a wild swingers lifestyle, the government turned that into a full-blown RICO case. Early in his closing, Agnifilo highlights Diddy's accomplishments and reminds jurors that 6 of Diddy's 7 children and his mother were sitting right there in the second row. He paints Diddy as a generous figure, someone who looks after the people in his life. He brings up Jane, saying she's living in a beautiful house and that Diddy's the one paying for it. He even says, quote, "Jane came up here and testified against him. I don't know what she's doing today. I hope she's having a nice day. But you know where she's doing it, in a house that he's paying for. And I hope they're having a nice Friday." Then, Agnifilo turns to the FBI raid on Diddy's home, calling it complete overkill. He tells jurors that hundreds of agents swarmed Diddy's place, full tactical gear and all. And for what? According to him, all they left with were boxes, and boxes of Astroglide and some drugs for personal use. Agnifilo even jokes, well, maybe all of this was worth it. At least now, the streets of America are safe from Astroglide. He says the case isn't really about racketeering or trafficking. It's about love, jealousy, infidelity, money, and domestic violence. And he begins with domestic violence. He reminds the jury of the Instagram post Cassie made after the Intercontinental Hotel footage surfaced. In it, Cassie wrote, "Thank you for your love and support. Domestic violence is the issue." Agnew tells jurors that Cassie could have said anything, that this was about trafficking, coercion, or fleeing in a foe, but she didn't. She specifically said domestic violence, and to him that speaks volumes. He even urges jurors to believe her, to believe what she said in that post. Then, he shifts focus to Cassie and Diddy's relationship, pointing out that she was already involved with someone when she first met Diddy. Agnifilo says she lied to her then boyfriend, who was 10 years older, so she could spend a weekend with Diddy in Miami, and that weekend, it sparked a relationship filled with extreme highs and devastating lows. According to Agnifilo, the real winner in their 11-year relationship is Cassie, because she's the one walking away with $30 million, while Diddy is behind bars. Then, he leans into the emotional side, saying Diddy and Cassie loved each other hard, but jealousy crept in. He says Cassie was jealous of Gina, and even more upset about Kim, especially after Diddy called Kim his soulmate at her funeral. To Agnifilo, that was Cassie's breaking point, and she finally did what she always could have done, left. He also brings up Kid Cudi, reminding the jury that Cudi testified Cassie was playing both him and Diddy, while the prosecution paints Cassie as being terrified of Diddy. Agnifilo says that didn't stop her from carrying on a long-term secret relationship with another man right under Diddy's nose. He says she's not afraid of him because she can handle it. And according to him, nothing in the evidence shows she ever intended to tell either man the truth. He wraps it with, Cassie was keeping it gangster. Cassie was basically like, I'm gonna make this work. I'll lie to him, lie to the other one, and I'll get a burner phone to keep the story going. From there, Agnifilo moves on to count 1, the racketeering conspiracy charge and the predicate acts tied to it. Quick refresher, the charge itself is conspiracy, but to prove it, prosecutors have to tie it to specific criminal acts, and that's where these predicate acts come in. He starts with the Capricorn Clark kidnapping allegation, which is listed under those predicate acts. Agnifilo begins by saying, and this is a direct quote, "There's something a little off about Capricorn. I think she's a good person at heart. Just a bit out there." And that's not him throwing shade, that's him setting the tone. He explains that Capricorn described her connection to Diddy as super platonic, but according to Agnifilo, that really means, I wanted more, but we stayed in the friend zone. He brings up a 2021 moment where she told Diddy she had a crush on him and felt like they wasted their chemistry. Agnifilo says that came from a place of wishing she was still in his life. So when she returned to work with him after the alleged kidnapping, that's why. She wanted her connection to him back, and that's what she meant when she said, I wanted my life back. Next, he tackles the warehouse lie detector story. Capricorn testified she was brought to a warehouse over multiple days to take a lie detector test about missing jewelry, but Agnifilo questions that logic if she went home each night. Then what? Are we saying that she got re-kidnapped every day? He jokes. So she left Monday night, got kidnapped again Tuesday, then went home again Tuesday night. and got re-kidnapped on Wednesday. He says that's not kidnapping, that's someone trying to prove they didn't steal anything. Then we move on to the December 2011 incident, where Capricorn claims Diddy showed up at her home at 5:30 a.m. with a weapon and forced her to go with him to Kid Cudi's house. Agnifilo, in his usual sarcastic tone, says Capricorn probably would have waited up for Diddy at 5:30 in the morning with her hair done. He says if Diddy asked her to go to the moon, she'd pack a bag. He insists Diddy didn't need a weapon, and it wouldn't even make sense for him to go to her just to get Kid Cudi's address, because Kid Cudi already testified that Cassie was the one who gave it to Diddy. In fact, Cudi said Cassie warned him herself because she was scared Diddy might show up, and Agnifilo takes it further. If Diddy arrived at 5:30 a.m. and they all made it to Kid Cudi's by 6:15, which is when Capricorn says she called Cassie to warn her, why didn't the police get the call until 8:20 a.m.? To Agnifilo, that means they were just chilling at her place for about 2 hours, and she willingly went with him. He argues she added the weapon detail later so she wouldn't look like she betrayed Cassie. He also claims it doesn't make sense for Diddy to carry a weapon at all that day because that's not his MO, he says. At the risk of sounding sexist, they were gonna do what men do, a good old-fashioned fistfight. He didn't touch that man's car because that's not who he is. Diddy's a fighter. If there's a problem, he'll come to your house. If you mess with his girl, he's showing up to fight, not shoot. He continues, we're talking John Wayne, 8 a.m. Hollywood Hills. No weapons, just a nose gets busted, maybe a black eye, but that's it. That's who Diddy is. This leads directly into the arson allegation blowing up Kid Cudi's car. Agnifilo says that's coward behavior and not Diddy's style. The only thing the prosecution had, an email from Cassie to her mom in Capricorn, claiming Diddy said he'd blow up Cudi's car, but no actual text, no voice note, no email from Diddy himself. Then comes the Cassie kidnapping allegation. Agnifilo says this part is strange, because Cassie testified that she didn't want to be at the hotel. She wanted to stay at Diddy's house. And if that's the case, how can it be kidnapping if she wanted to go? He says that hotel stay was all about avoiding bad press, not police, and that's the same logic he applies to the alleged bribery. Everyone on Diddy's staff knew the hotel employees leaked footage and info. They weren't worried about cops. They were worried about TMZ. He even says, nobody was scared of police. It's a terrible video. Yeah, but it's a misdemeanor. They were terrified of the headlines, not handcuffs. Agnifilo does admit Diddy messed up when he texted Cassie saying the cops are here and arresting me. But he says that was just him trying to get her attention, not a cover-up. Then there's the NDA that the hotel security officer signed. Agnif says that NDA had a clause that allowed police to be told what happened as long as Diddy's legal team got a heads up, and the only reason for that heads up, so they could ask the court to seal certain details to protect against bad PR again. This wasn't about hiding things from law enforcement. Finally, we get to the witness tampering accusation involving Mia. The government says that Diddy's associate DeRock tried to bribe Mia by getting her to talk to Diddy and offering her money, and Mia testified that she believed that money came from Diddy himself. But Agnifilo pushes back, pointing out a text where Mia tells DeRock she needed money. I do charity work here helping families build small businesses, houses, whatever they need, but I'm out of money's dry. Agnifilo's point. She asked for help, and now they're calling it bribery. So then DeRock replies, I'm proud of you. You're like a real sister to me. If you need something, I got you. I'm not loaded, but I'm not broke either. Love you, let's talk tomorrow. Next, Agnifilo turns his attention to the drug distribution charge. He admits flat out yes, Diddy had an addiction, but using substances personally and occasionally asking assistants to help isn't the same as trafficking. He brings up a moment from trial when David James, one of Diddy's former assistants, testified. James said he once got an 8-ball of Koana for one of Diddy's guests in St. Tropez, but made it clear that the request didn't come from Diddy. In fact, James tried to keep it from Diddy altogether. Agnifilo argues, if this was a real criminal enterprise, wouldn't James have proudly gone to Diddy and said, hey, I'm doing the work, just like we all agreed as part of this operation? But the opposite happened. James hid it, and Agnifilo says that alone proves this wasn't some coordinated drug ring. Then he pivots to the trafficking charge and challenges how anyone was supposed to know when a hotel night officially crossed that line. He sarcastically asks, so, was Freakoff number 76 trafficking, but Freakoffs 1 through 75 weren't? He says that if you're basing this off of Cassie's texts, you wouldn't even know when that line got crossed, because she was consistently engaged and seemed interested. He also tries to reframe the infamous Intercontinental Hotel incident, saying it wasn't about a freak-off at all, it was about a phone. He points to the footage, showing Cassie holding something when she exits the room, and then later, Diddy has that item in his hand. Agnifilo spin. Diddy wasn't running after her to drag her back, he was chasing her to get his phone back. Now the attorney shifts focus to Jane, arguing that those so-called hotel nights were really just bougie date nights, nice rooms, soft lighting, Bryson Tiller or sometimes Usher playing dinner beforehand, the whole vibe. But he says Jane wanted more. She wanted Instagram-worthy moments. And then he hits the crowd with this: "You'll know who her baby daddy is, right?" And adds, "You know who she was with in Vegas too. Or maybe you don't." So while Diddy was special to her in some ways, Agnifilo argues he was also just a part of her lifestyle, a lifestyle she was already used to, claims motivation played a role. Jane was into the perks, the luxury, the aesthetic. And according to him, in the moment, everything was consensual. It's just now, in hindsight, she regrets it, and regret, he says, isn't coercion. Agnifilo also throws in a shady jab saying Jane must have had the worst lawyer in the world, considering how little she got in child support. But the man actually covering the bills, paying for the home she lives in with her child, is Diddy. Full shade. No chaser. Then Agnifilo dives into what allegedly happened at Jane's house. In June 2024, he says this was the first time Jane got physically violent for no reason. According to him, she slammed Diddy's head into a counter, threw candles at him, and cursed him out using a harsh slur. She also testified that she was running through the house while Diddy was chasing her, breaking down doors to every room she entered. Then she claimed she changed out of her date night dress into another dress so she could run. But Agnifilo stops and says, hold on. She testified on cross that she's a super active person. So why would someone who's trying to run throw on another dress instead of sweatpants or sneakers? He says the timeline that night just doesn't add up. According to him, after the fight, Jane left the house, hid for a short while, not even 2 hours, and came back by 8:30 p.m. From there, she and Diddy apparently spent hours talking, working things out. He says around 5 a.m., a full 7 hours later, is when the entertainer was called over, and that entertainer just so happens to be the same one Jane saw in Vegas a few months earlier. Agnifilo ends that section with this: there's something Jane didn't say about Vegas that you'd need to know to make full sense of what went down on June 18th and 19th, because it doesn't make sense otherwise, especially since it's the same entertainer she was with in Vegas and Combs never even knew. So Agnifilo wraps his entire argument with this: Jane's outburst that night. He claims it wasn't random at all, it was strategic, a move she made to have something just in case she ever needed to sue Diddy or hold something over his head. Then he jumps to the transportation for pay-for-play charge. According to the defense, none of the entertainers were paid for intimacy, they were paid for their time, and he emphasizes that the two entertainers who testified never once called themselves prostitutes. From there, Agnifilo begins closing things out. He tells the jury that KK wasn't a co-conspirator, she was just the most helpful person you could ever meet. He also claims Cassie asked the entertainers to urinate on her, and says this case isn't about trafficking, it's about domestic violence and Diddy's messy personal life. Finally, he says this entire thing kicked off because the federal government chose to pursue it, not Cassie, not Jane, not Mia. None of them reported crimes to police. It was Cassie's lawsuit that caught the attention of investigators, and because of who Diddy is, they pounced. And so, Agnifilo asks the jury to clear Diddy on all charges, and send him home to the family that's been waiting for him. But it's not over, because now the government gets a rebuttal, and prosecutor Comey is the one delivering it. Yes, like James Comey, so I can finally pronounce this one right. First, Comey tackles the pay-for-play transportation charge. She straight up says it's absurd to believe that Diddy flew women across the country, watched them sleep with his girlfriends while he did his thing on the sidelines, handed them stacks of cash, and we're supposed to believe it was just for their time. Common sense, she says, tells you exactly what was being paid for. She even called Diddy a masked, masturbating celebrity, and honestly, that line is wild. Then she brings up receipts, text messages between Diddy and a rep from Cowboys for Angels. In one, the rep reminds Diddy he still owes $600 for one of the entertainers, and Diddy responds, he couldn't even perform. He's lucky he got anything. Comey's point: if it wasn't about intimacy, why bring up performance in the first place? Next, she addresses the racketeering angle. She says you don't need a whole mafia to prove conspiracy. KK and The Rock were enough. Even when they didn't like what was happening, they still helped. She points out that after the Intercontinental Hotel incident, they were all smiles with Cassie, but then quickly got to work trying to bribe the hotel security guard. So yeah, they played both sides, and that, she says, is part of the conspiracy. Then Comey circles back to Agnifilo's claim that Diddy is just a hands and fists kind of guy. She claps back with sure with his girlfriends, but with real threats like Suge Knight. He grabs weapons. So if he was heading to Kid Cudi's house that day, a man who could actually fight back, then of course he brought a weapon. And when it comes to Diddy not working alone, Comey says, of course he didn't. This man doesn't even plug in his own phone charger. He had an inner circle who kept rugs on hand, arranged to travel for entertainer shelt, move money around Diddy, delegated the dirt. She says they made sure it got done. Then she returns to the narcotic distribution argument. Comey reminds the jury under the law, giving rugs to someone else still counts as distribution. Now she takes on the argument that these women were willing participants, and she shuts it down, saying comparing their involvement to something like lemonade preferences is wild. She Says these women were often bruised and beaten, soaked in oil, awake for days at a time, walking around in 8-inch heels, dealing with infections and pain. She says, that's not a preference, that's abuse, and pretending it's anything else is just ridiculous. And finally, Kami takes on the idea that Cassie, Jane, and Mia were lying. She reminds the jury that Cassie got her $20 million less than 24 hours after filing her lawsuit. By the time she hit the witness stand, she had already been paid. She had also already settled with the Intercontinental Hotel. There was no financial incentive left. She was up there, reading explicit old messages, recounting some of the most traumatic moments of her life, not for money, but because she believed it was the right thing to do. As for Jane, Kami points out she never sued Diddy. Diddy is the one paying her rent and legal fees. If she was after money, wouldn't it make more sense to keep him out of jail? Plus, her texts telling Diddy she felt coerced and wanted to stop hotel nights came before Cassie's lawsuit even dropped. So there's no financial motive, no bandwagoning. Kami ends by saying just because these women tried to find joy in life, post on social, hang with friends, doesn't mean they were lying. Plenty of people carry trauma and still manage to smile through the pain. She even claps back at Agnafilo's comment that Cassie's the winner in all this. Her response: what exactly did she win? Black eyes, head wounds, drug binges, UTs, getting urinated on. Finally, she circles back to the Intercontinental Hotel incident and Jane's house in 2024. She says if that hotel incident was about a phone, then why did the security guard Flores testify that Cassie was the one asking for her phone back? And the entertainer that was called to Jane's house, that wasn't a coincidence. By then, the raids had already happened. Cowboys for Angels was out, and the only option left was a familiar face. And even after all of that, Kami says, what matters most is what happened next. Diddy allegedly stood inches from Jane, handed her a pill, and told her, go back out there and suck. Kami's final word: Diddy's been getting away with this for 20 years. It's time someone held him accountable. Who? Chili. I'm tired. And just like that, deliberations start Monday. If you liked this video, don't play, like, comment, subscribe, and tell everybody. I put so much time into this. Also hit that Patreon and buy some merch.